Hey there everyone, what's going on? Maji here with the patch notes rundown of the 20th of November 2012. This is of course the patch notes rundown that come with the evolution of combat, so there's actually surprisingly not that many this week. But anyways, first up under the graphical patch notes this week, cave wall tops no longer disappear when the camera gets too close in the Lumbridge/Dorgashun Goblin Maze. Equipping wolf legs in the customization store as a female will no longer alter the player's skin color. Ham hoods no longer remove female faces. And finally under graphical, players' heads no longer detach when wearing Guthan's helm as a female. Next up under the quest challenges and achievements category this week, players can now progress through the Tales of the Muspah, I guess that's how you pronounce that, if they left the frozen cave at a certain point. Galrana should no longer wander off, and the player should no longer get stuck looking for Bollery's path during the Prisoner of the Glufrey quest. It is no longer possible to ride a sled outside the designated area on the Trollweiss Mountain. Next up, under the skills and minigames category this week, players who had their quest points lowered last week due to the Prince Ali rescue quest being removed from the game, have had their Tears of Guthix quest point check also lowered by 3 quest points. The Tears of Guthix experience will now be placed in Dungeoneering correctly if all other skills are maxed. So if you have 99 in everything but you're not 120 Dungeoneering, your Tears of Guthix experience will actually go on to Dungeoneering, which is very helpful for me. Players can no longer smuggle Crucible gloves outside of the minigame by using the tutorial. And finally, under skills and minigames this week, a clue scroll no longer references crates upstairs in the Alcarid Palace, as the crate in question is now downstairs. And finally this week, the other category, surprisingly only 3 this time, but first, it is no longer possible to equip a two-handed sword and a shield using the Equip All function of a gravestone. Players who select music tracks manually will no longer have the music track change upon entering the Troll War Zone area. And finally, the origami balloons no longer stall damage by spam using them. Normally by now I would be done with the patch notes video, but with an update released Thursday, they made a few changes, so I decided to go ahead and add them to the patch notes video as well. First up, under the minigames category, the NPCs in the fight cave have been made tougher. The catapult room in the Warriors Guild no longer hits the player 4 times per hit. And the Pest Control Void Knight is now tough enough to survive a game. Next, under the equipment heading, the Boogie Bow now works as expected. The Death Touch darts now work as intended. Players can also no longer fire one at an NPC that has already been tagged by another player. Offhand White Claws have been added to Sir Vivian's store. The summoning skill capes are no longer more powerful than the other skill capes. Adamant and Rune Claws now show the correct information in the smithing interface. Spined, skeletal, and rock shell boots and gloves now have wield requirements. The Greater Runic Staff now works as intended. The Illuminated Book of Law now works as intended as well. And switching Dragonfire shields between the melee, ranged, and magic versions at the Dragonkin Forge, which is near Kuradal, now uses up a blast hammer per shield. Next up under the quest category, the Goblin Transformation Potions can once again be created. The Elemental Workshop quest can once again be completed. Elvarg no longer drains all of a player's prayer in one hit. It is once again possible to put Karambuan poison on spears for the Tai Bowani quest. I guess that's how you say it. Family Crest is also able to once again be completed. It is once again possible to attack Jubbly Birds. Giant Bats once again drop the Giant Bat Wing for the Rag and Bone Man quest. And players can once again enter the inadequacy part of Recipe for Disaster. Next up, under the skills category, Dungeoneering trash mobs have been made tougher. Bosses in Dungeoneering on the Abandoned, Occult, and Warped floors have been made tougher. Smithing tracks in the Artisan's Workshop now requires the correct items. Watering cans can now be filled, and magic watering cans can now be used as well. The Warped Dungeoneering floors now use the correct altar. I would assume this is the rune crafting altar. it is once again possible to craft any version of the Titan's Constitution summoning scroll. Crafting uncut topaz now opens a window about crafting topaz instead of crafting jade. Meat pies can once again be created. Pickaxes now cost 2 bars to smith instead of 1. I know a bunch of people made a lot of profit off of that little update, so glad to see that's fixed. Under the miscellaneous category, weight has been re-added to the equip interface. Prayer potions and prayer flasks now restore the same amount of prayer potions per prayer points per sip rather. Ganodermic beasts have been given significantly more health, and as such the trash cabbage drops have been removed. The difficulty of combat with Glaycors has been modified. A side stone has been added to the point players towards the Combat Academy. Several changes have been made to streamline the new opening sequence to the game. An info box warning is shown to players upon entering the wilderness about the PK sculling mechanic being removed, to ensure that everyone realizes that you will now lose everything on death while you're in the wilderness. Mobilizing armies teleport will now require an air rune rather than an earth rune. Fungal magi now work correctly as Slayer creatures, including given the buffs from the Slayer helm when on a task. Prayer tooltips will now work on the action bar when the action bar is locked. Chat options are now the correct way around when asking about training sessions and training dummies in the Combat Academy. Sword chicks can once again be attacked. The Smite ability has been renamed to Decimate to avoid confusion with the Smite prayer. Attacking shades now gives the correct amount of experience and hit harder. Blue Dragonhide sets are now free to play. Combat daily challenges can now be blocked at level 200 combat. Grot worms are now non-aggressive, and the Gazaras are no longer deactivated upon equipping weapons or shields. And finally, the F keys can once again be used to switch interfaces, regardless of whether the player is attempting to chat or not. So that wraps up all of the patch notes, plus all of the bonus patch notes from the system update this week. Hit the subscribe button on the screen now if you want to subscribe to my channel, and be sure to check out one of the other 2 videos on the screen. And I thank you all for watching. Be sure to hit the like button below the video, and I will see you next week for another rundown of the patch notes.